everybody. This is the first episode of A Cup of Joe with Mendo. I got special guest Jason Orban over here. Jay is the assistant coach for the men's soccer program at St. Francis, Brooklyn, as well as a youth coach for the ODP regional program. So thanks, Jay, for joining us. Hopefully you got your cup of Joe, and it's like old times. I'm basically in California with you, even though we're distancing, but this is good to catch up and talk about soccer. So in today's episode, the big thing, since we're all in quarantine right now and it's difficult for us coaches, the big topic that I wanted to talk about is how us coaches and our players and the ways in which they can stay engaged, obviously in the sport that we love, and some of the methods and tips that we can share with them. So as a coach, I know it's difficult, but what are some of the things that you're doing now in order to, stay involved and stay active mentally?
Yeah, so a few things. One, for myself, reading is huge. I saw a great tweet that said, coaches finally have the one thing that we say that we never have, which is time. So it's about how you utilize it. So I've been doing a lot of reading. Just wrote a book called Chaos, which was about military leadership. So that was good. Finding different books that kind of cover your role as a coach, but in different aspects of life, I think is valuable because you learn different lessons. But within the game, we're fortunate where at the college we have all of our games on video that we can rewatch over and over again. So part of what I'm doing for myself is personally trying to improve the way I analyze games based on our game model, what trends that I'm looking for. And now what we're doing is we're going to look at our players and we're going to come up with a model that breaks down specifically, what their key roles are. And we're going to do that by giving them an assignment where they get to research 3 to 5 players in their position, which they think are the best in the world. And they're essentially going to come up with an analysis of why. So what are their key qualities? What do they bring to the team? What do they bring technically? Tactically, what are their key actions? And just finding unique ways to kind of engage the players in the time. But mostly trying to keep things fun, keep it exciting, and making sure kind of bring as many people into the game as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that too, there needs to, as well, it's a big transition from being in the classroom per se into, say, a home environment where we're trying to balance the online studies, but also the soccer aspect. And it's kind of weird because when you're away from home, it's almost like a routine where you can really focus on something, and then you go back home to kind of disconnect and kind of be yourself. But now we're all pretty much inside where we're trying to balance everything from maybe school, work, soccer, and then also to like the relaxation piece. So I think some coaches, I know have mentioned to me that the disconnection piece is a little bit more challenging now, but it's also a good way for us to provide those resources that you mentioned, for our players to stay involved. And I think a couple of those things is with developing the plans and some of the things that you mentioned, do you feel like the players are receptive being where they're more virtual versus obviously that one-on-one personal connection that we have as coaches?
So I think like everything you do as a coach, you have to know how far you can gauge players on off-field work. I think even when we're active in our season, we have players that are more receptive to video, players that are more receptive to individual meetings, just because that's their learning style. And then you have more players that are the type that like to get on the field, like to have the ball, like to be around their teammates, and that's their time to play. So I think it depends. But one of the key things I'm finding is at this point, specifically in college, all of our boys have been virtual, and the majority of our boys living in the city, they've been inside for a long time now. So finding new ways to kind of stimulate them cognitively and emotionally, bring them back into the game has been beneficial. We've had academic meetings. We've thought about different challenges we could do on social media that had nothing to do with soccer. And I think they were a little less interested in doing that. But the idea of being back in the game, no matter what that looks like, stimulates them mentally and emotionally, because I'm sure like most coaches, they miss it. It's a part of their life. It's not just something you do. It's something that is intrinsic to who they are. So from that perspective, yeah, I think they've been pretty receptive to that. And especially since now is a time where we can really just focus on each kid. We can develop the team, but we have all this time now where you could sit down with a player and go through their clips, go through their actions, ask them questions, and offer a space where they can give you feedback as well. So I think overall, it's a good practice.
Good, awesome. I mean, I think some of the things that have helped me too, and I'm sure for I know I can speak for you as well, is big on self-reflection and how coaches out there can use this time inside to self-reflect and kind of identify their goals and maybe potentially training methods or be open to newer ideas to shape what they want to improve personally as a coach, if that's team related or self-oriented goals for them in the future. I think that's a good way. And I think one of the biggest things that nowadays everything's electronic. I'm a big believer in a normal notebook. It could be salt and pepper, like back when we were in like fifth grade, but
Yep.
even a written notebook where you have to put pen to paper for me is more valuable, and that's because when you tend to write slowly, and your thoughts tend to come out more on paper than just typing away. So that's something that I've been trying to focus on and think about ways that I can improve, and that leads to your point. I think analyzations in sport, if it's from previous games or just even watching on TV. I know some of our coaches are not always, college coaches like us, but um, there's always games on rerun or things like that, or internet, YouTube, that these coaches can potentially go and analyze to stay sharp and think about things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's probably the easiest thing you could do is when you wake up in the morning, find a new series or podcast or an interview to watch. There are a ton of great documentaries and interviews. I know Alex Ferguson has several, Jurgen Klopp has several, Mourinho has several. And I think there's a great opportunity to just have something on in the background while you're making your breakfast or something like that. And because we're all kind of in this moment where we're at home, I think we're a little bit more receptive to hearing some sort of background noise because it offers a different voice. So I found that to be a good practice. I like listening to a different interview. I like even some of the Netflix stuff that come on where it's like, I know Juventus first team is a great one. And it's just being able to sit back and Massimiliano Allegri, and he's talking about, how he engages his players, the way that he demands in a training session, the different tone. And then you have guys like Del Piero talk about the history of the club and how that's kind of helped build, what the traditions are, what it means to be that type of player, and just rethinking your own standards at that point and saying, okay, this is a club that's had a great tradition for so long, that's been so effective. How can I create similar standards? How can I create a similar structure to where I am? So I think auditory learning is key, not just sitting down and writing and taking notes. That all has great value. But I think having access to auditory at this time is so important, especially for people that have been isolated either by themselves or even with the same person. It's important to have different voices. And I think right now, specifically, that stimulates a different part of the brain.
Absolutely. So I mean that's great, and I think these are all tips that as coaches we can take, and if that's from, say, like we just spoke about, books, podcasts, analyzations through videos, reading, obviously as mentioned, self-reflection, development of plans and activities for the players. Those are all ways that we can grow as a coach, but also push our players to the next level and learn a bit about them more than maybe we have in the one-on-one to the weekly sessions that we have. So, I mean, the next thing I wanted to talk about is player engagement. I know that you talked a little bit about, the college process with those players. So, with being heavily involved in youth soccer, what are some of the things that you think would be most important for our coaches to work on or share, but also to not where it's overly overwhelming for them? Since they're balancing, school, life challenges and stuff like that.
So I think there's two things. First off, we're used to a situation where we see our players 2 times a week. At Northport, we train twice a week, right? And I mean, we have a game on the weekend. So our only main interactions with soccer is just with the kids on the training field. I think something that's really important is this in this time is to use your role as a coach to develop the community within your team. Engage more with parents, off the field. Make sure you're sending them information. Maybe this is a great time to help inform them on your model and what you're doing on the field so that it's a little bit more inclusive and they understand the work. So that's one thing. I think building the community, making sure that you're engaging with all the stakeholders is key, not just the kids. Make sure you're talking with the parents and everyone. I think two, it's important to understand kind of your club community, what the structure of that is around how competitive are they, what the resources are, What are the motivations of the kids? Is it highly competitive? Is it recreational? Do most of the kids like to be with their friends? And then you use that environment to kind of create how you're going to engage the kids. So at Northport, we have teams that want to be competitive, but it's a very community-based club. So you have to find ways to engage that. One of the things that we did was create a skills challenge where kids can post videos of themselves performing different skills, different training exercises, and then we highlight that on social media. And
Right.
what that does is it continues to build that sense of community. So that's the first one. The second one is this is a great time to sit down with your youth players and maybe give them a bit of, like we're doing, like I said, with the college, personalized feedback that you don't really get the chance to during the year because you only see them twice a week and they're running from school to soccer and then maybe lacrosse practice or dinner after that. So it's a great time to sit down and think, okay, you know, player A, 10 years old, this is what their skill is. What are their goals? So maybe you sit down, you have a video chat with the parents and the kid, and you talk about some things they can do at home. Maybe you're sending age appropriate workouts to the kids based off of their level of enthusiasm and their overall skill. So it's just a matter of really taking into account all the things that influence the player's environment and then managing that environment as best as you can in a way that's fun and engaging.
Absolutely. I think that that's huge, and there's a few things that I think for us as coaches can share besides just maybe the the written aspect of plans and stuff like that. I know that there's a lot of apps on the market that, um, and I know it's tough where we can't really be in groups at the moment, but where it can be individually based. Tech football app is a big one that can be where players are on their own and work on different skills, even in the house, um, or even request information from a coach. If I'm a player, maybe going at reaching out and say, hey coach, what are a few things that I can work on? Also try challenges. I know that there's a lot of challenges online now, if that's say through YouTube or social media, and it would be great for our players out there to go out there and give it a try, if it's not hosted by a club, but even just individuals out there, to give it a try and work on that skill. And I think a big thing is for our players, it's a perfect time where if the weather's not great, the players can use soccer, maybe as we were talking about for coaches, to watch games. It's good to stay involved, and there's not really anything live right now, but to watch a game and even play games like FIFA, I think there's a level where we want our players to be active and healthy by, being outside with the ball, and that's a big part of it. But I think the video game side through FIFA tournaments or just individually with friends where you're staying connected socially, but also you're playing a game that requires you to think maybe from a tactical perspective, and players tend to replicate what they see in matches from like favorite players or what they can potentially do at a skill level in FIFA. So I think that that could always be a good thing, and not too much of it, of course, because we want them to study on academics as well. But I think that's a good way for them to stay, mentally connected with the game.
Yeah, I have a question for you as well because you just mentioned this is a great opportunity for players to take the accountability to engage their coach. So I'm curious for you. This is unique now because we're used to, some coaches may be used to their relationship just being on the field and their relationship being a coach. So if you haven't built the foundations of creating a space where the players feel comfortable maybe to ask questions, or maybe your players don't naturally do that, how would you then, as a coach, what steps would you take to kind of create an environment where players feel comfortable being vulnerable enough to ask questions to engage the coach, that maybe they're 10 or 11, or maybe they're older players that are looking to pursue college and now, they don't know what that's going to look like. How would you, what would you suggest for coaches to create a healthy, vulnerable environment like that?
Yeah, I think it starts with, and it's tricky now since we're obviously not together. But I think it starts with meetings like this, and maybe collectively as a group to be on some type of a virtual group type meeting where we could all see each other and discuss, almost like if we were in the classroom, a meeting of potential goals individually or as a team. And that could be different ways, from team related, obviously not together, but maybe connecting with a teammate or sharing thoughts or connecting maybe in a virtual way if it's say through FIFA or a competition on apps and challenges with each other. I think that's one way, just to stay involved. But the second piece is for the coach to interact virtually with the player on a 1v1 basis, kind of like what we're doing. So an overall meeting I think would be helpful. It keeps the team together and kind of say, all right, well, now this is a time for us to self-reflect maybe as a player. I'm going to be providing feedback, but now I'm going to reach out to each of you and we're going to have a one-on-one conversation about it. And I want you to jot some ideas down, some objectives, some goals, and it's always good to go off the SWOT model, which is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and see what the players come up with and have them share it. And engage in that one-on-one conversation for them to come out with what they perceive themselves as or where areas that they want to improve and see. And I think that's good for the coach to take notes as well and to kind of now learn more about the player and relate to the player and have them open up more. And I think just showing that the coach cares for the player and saying, here, I'm here to help you. This is my feedback. I want you to think about this. Do you have any concerns, any thought, and try to get that where they can open up and be out of their shell a little bit. I think leads towards that, vulnerability aspect of it. That's based on personality too. Not every kid wants to share things with people, and I get that, but I think that the care aspect and opening up where you're showing the support for them is one way to get there.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's a great question that we ask when we're working with the regional kids at ID camp, and it's I feel I play my best when, and when I started to really consider that situation, a lot of kids respond with when I'm confident, and now that's a really interesting comment because that's something that is really, when you think about it, player controlled, but there are all these outside factors. So one of the questions I actually began to ask my players when we would do individual feedback meetings was, what can my coach do to help me more? And I
Right.
think that's such an important question to be asking our kids now when we talk about individual feedback. Get them to recognize that this is a codependent relationship where it's equal, and it's, what, I this is where I feel less confident. Here's where I think, I could use more support from you. And I think just extending that question is so key to opening that more transparent relationship. And then finding ways to engage the parents as well. Have the kids sit down and say, this may be something I need from you guys. Just finding ways to encourage them to consider all the resources they have, especially now when they're not on the field with their teammates. Really start to think about who they can kind of lean on to help in this situation.
Right. Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that these are some really good, concepts and ideas that we shared today. And hopefully our audience and the viewers can take something from this, because I think it's something that we try to implement and grow for ourselves and our friends out there in the coaching world. So I really appreciate your time. And, I want to thank everyone for watching. Jay, thanks for being on. And
Of course.
I want you guys to check back and see if there's anything that you feel that you can all add. Follow us on social media, and if anyone is interested with resources to learn, some advice, suggestions, feel free to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to share it with you. And until next time, thank you.
So yeah.
Roasted from Brazil. I like me cappuccino with my